are joined by Georgette Tan, whom Irene introduced earlier, President of the United Women Singapore. She has multiple roles and is a very active individual whom I think everybody will find very inspiring. She's on the board of the Singapore Council of Women's Organizations and is the chair of Board Gender and Initiative of the SCWO. She also serves on the task force on family violence, which is co-chaired by the Ministry of Social and Family Development, as well as the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, I've had the privilege of having prior, kind of coffees with Georgette, and I was intrigued to find out that she was the former senior vice president of communications at Mastercard, taking care of internal and external comms, and also spearheading Mastercard's CSR efforts, not only in Singapore, but across the Asia Pacific region. And before joining Mastercard, Georgette was the VP of comms at CNBC Asia and Dow Jones Asia. And she has also held senior comms roles with the Hong Kong Trade Development Council and the Singapore Tourist Promotion Board. So, I mean, even a 3-minute introduction, I feel, doesn't do justice to her background. So, let's spend a bit of time to hear from her. Now, before I engage Georgette, I just wanted to mention that we are really honored and privileged to actually catch her before the rest of the media will be all over her. On the 24th of September, just in 13 days, she's going to be receiving the Individual Achievement Sabre Award at the virtual Asia Pacific Sabre Award ceremony. So I think we've spoken about her enough. Now let's hear from her. Georgette, perhaps you could share with us a little bit about your, the various roles that you've had in the public and private sector.
Sure. Thank you, Nisa. And thank you, IPRS, for inviting me. And it's truly an honor. I'm really delighted. And of course, it's a Friday evening, so it's great to have an audience. I've had a somewhat long career. I've been fortunate in that I've had some amazing roles. I've worked for some amazing organizations, both in Singapore and outside. And I've actually had a chance to work in some other markets and gain experience and build a career that's, been fulfilling for me, starting out first kind of in the public sector. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because I think it gave me a good grounding, and it taught me discipline and understanding rules of the road, and that kind of a strictness, I guess, in how you look at things and the analysis that one is required to have. And then, I was fortunate enough to be able to then move from public sector to the private sector, to the corporate life, where I've worked for a couple of organizations and organizations who have evolved a lot over the years too. And I was part of that evolution. I was part of the change, and I'd like to think I helped in the change a little bit too. So yeah, absolutely. And then, more recently, the move from the corporate space to the nonprofit space, because that's really where my passion has been. Nisa, I know I've mentioned this to you already, that it was while I was at Mastercard that I was actually given the opportunity to develop the CSR strategy for the region, aligning it obviously to the business and making sure that it was, that it aligned to business, but also it was something that was extremely good from an internal perspective, from an employee engagement perspective too. And that was where I had a chance to kind of take a look at what was available in the nonprofit space, and then focus my attention really on women's empowerment, because that's what I'm most passionate about. Despite Singapore being a very progressive place, and we all know that there are great opportunities for women, there's still work that needs to be done. And what better opportunity than to work in this environment and do what we can to better the space that we live in. for women, and particularly young girls as they start to take their journeys and their first jobs and their careers and such. So I was a bit of a late comer to the CSR space, to the giving space, nonprofit. That said, I think I'm trying to make up for it right now, because that's what I do. I devote my time to it, and I'm really loving it. I truly am. I consider myself very blessed that I'm given the opportunity to do so.
Nice. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Georgette. We wanted to hear from you, in a couple of areas. One of them is in the area of reputation building,
Sure.
from action and not words. And I think you're an exemplar, across the different organizations you've led.
That's kind
Could
of you to
you?
say that.
Oh, you're welcome. Could you enlighten us? How have you been doing this? What's your advice for professionals who want to do the same?
Building the reputation, I think that comes first and foremost. It's not just the veneer that you put on, the icing that you put on. No amount of good comms can do that. You've got to have the right values at the start, at the very, very core. You've got to have the right people who believe in it and who are devoted and dedicated and committed to living those values. It starts at the very top. It goes all the way through, and people need to be empowered to feel that they have a right to also speak up and do and live those values too. So it starts there, and then and only then can you work with that and build a strong reputation from there. And then you can add, you can leverage the strengths of the people, the assets, the products, the services, the environment, the work that you do, and absolutely communications and CSR can lend itself to projecting that, to telling it, putting across the messaging, but it starts at the very core, being of the right stuff.
Nice. No, thank you. Would you just this is a nice segue. We are wondering whether you could share some of your observations in terms of the trends of comms and PR,
Sure.
not only in a regular environment, but of course, from the COVID kind of slightly different environment we find ourselves in this past couple of months or this year.
Sure. And it's actually been interesting because when I came into the comm space, PR space, it was all about external PR. It was all about what coverage can you get, what publications can you be seen in, right? At the right publications, and clearly that was obviously the main focus, and that's changed and that's evolved over time. The medium in which that media news or information is consumed, that's changed. Technology has hit a huge role in the way people consume information, the way people are informed, the way people make decisions around buying, all those things. So technology, obviously, huge player and leveler, right? Because technology then makes it available to everybody, not just a small minority of the people who can afford it, right? Technology has leveled that playing field. So I think technology has made the role of the communicator easier, but also more challenging in some respects too, because you're always on. Everything is in real time. Responses, reactions are going to take place in real time. There's no pause. There's no lag time in between. So you're always going to be on. You're always going to be on your toes, and you need to be able to pivot all the time, very, very quickly. And you need to be prepared. So it just means you prepare even more before you put anything out there. So I think technology is definitely a huge factor. I think there's been a shift also. It's not just external comms that's important. I think internal comms employee engagement, employee communications has become so critical, and in many ways a differentiator for businesses, right? To be able to attract, to be able to retain right businesses, it's about employees. How do they feel about the organization? And how do they feel about the organization and the work that they do? This level of loyalty, will I stay? I want to work for a company that is of the right stuff, that it has a good purpose, it's doing things for the community, that it has the right people. That's important. And so that internal communications, the working with HR, the working with and collaborating with senior management to get that across, I think has become really, really important as a function. So the internal function, I think, is important. But I also think there are other factors, that other things that have come into the space of comms that are also just as critical. So things like data analysis, so statistics and math, I think are really important. So if you've got a grounding in that, that's a huge advantage. Being able to understand and read data and develop stories and nuggets, and pull nuggets from data, that makes you a more valuable communications person. If you have a little technology, a background, being able to understand products and the technology behind it and the sciences behind it, think how much more valuable you are in conveying product information and making it simple. I think that's key. Language. The common denominator in all of this, whether it's technology or internal versus external communication, it's always about language. And I think sometimes we get caught up with how do we make it pretty, right? But you strip that away. How do you actually make it simple so that the message gets across? I'm always reminded, and I always like to share this piece of advice that that the communications team, the global communications team, received from the CEO, Ajay Banga of Mastercard. When you write a press release, make sure that you show it to your grandmother. And if your grandmother can understand what you're trying to say, you've succeeded. If your grandmother doesn't understand what you're trying to say in that press release, start again. I thought that was super valuable. And we forget that. We forget that along the way.
No, I absolutely agree. One thing that I've been wondering, in our conversations and kind of getting to know you a little better, I feel we are partners in the process, right? So, the Institute working with your organization working with many others and supporting many women out there.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice and what are your aspirations? Because put ourselves in the context of in the national context, Singapore turning 55 here this year, right? What can we do as individuals, as organizations, as institutes of higher learning, to create a city of good? What would you suggest to us?
The first thing is just to get involved. Take an interest. Find what your passion point is. For me, it happens to be women's empowerment, support of women, gender equality. So, I was able to kind of hone in on that. To all the people listening in, find what you're most passionate about. It may not be about women. It may be about children. It may be about, finding cures for diseases. It may be around conservation. It may be about animals. It may be about elimination of plastic in oceans. There are so many causes, and they're all good causes, right? And they all they require, they demand, they deserve respect and attention. So if you find that sweet spot, that passion, then step up. All right, step up, find ways to get involved. And it could be anything from being a member of an organization. So being a member of IPRS, being a member of UWS, there's so many different good organizations to be a member. Be a volunteer, okay? They're not one and the same sometimes, right? But be a volunteer. find out where an organization needs help. And it's not just about making a donation. The donations are important, don't get me wrong. Nonprofits, NGOs, charities cannot function and operate without budgets, so they need funds. All right. So you are all, every one of you is in a position and an influencer in making that happen, whether it's on your own or with a client of yours or within your own organization or within your own community and your own family. So step up, find a cause, support it. Right, be a volunteer, be a member. And as I said, it's not just about the donation. It's about using your own expertise. So skills-based volunteering is very important. And all organizations need this. So whether you're a marketing, digital, expert, all organizations need that. You're great with website design. We need that. Everybody needs that. Fundraising, helping with marketing collaterals, proofreading, helping with an annual report. I mean, there's so many things that an organization needs, let alone, work with partners, right? Introducing partners. If some of your clients are saying, you know what, we're thinking maybe we want to start to move and support, find an organization to support that is akin and aligned to our business. Guess what? That's the best thing, doing an introduction. Every organization would love an introduction to potential supporters, potential sponsors, and stakeholders. So everybody has a role to play.
No, this is fascinating. I mean, I'm so glad to hear from you that, you don't have to be somebody in a specific sort of role, carrying a certain title. Everybody can chip in and contribute. So far we've been talking somewhat in abstract terms. We're talking about communications, we're talking about organizations. Can you help us make it real? You are engaging with so many beneficiaries. In the COVID setting, you're helping so many women. Could you perhaps share what keeps you going? What when you wake up every morning, what inspires you? Who are the people you're helping?
I jump out of bed simply because of what I do. All right. That's not to say I didn't jump out of bed when I was in the corporate space. I loved my work, and I think that's important. Everybody's got to love what they do, to be passionate about it, and to be hopefully good at it too. And I love what I do. I love being able to help. Being in a position to be able to help women, maybe not directly, but indirectly. And that's just as important. So we've been running, because we're not a direct service, but we are in a position to help other organizations, grassroots organizations who are helping women in need, disadvantaged women, young girls. So thank you for asking for a concrete example. I think it doesn't get more real than what we've all been experiencing these last 6 or 7 months. The clampdown, the circuit breaker, being confined to the home, and having the added stress of losing one's job or fear of losing the job. I think that sometimes it's even worse, not knowing, right, or being furloughed. All these have put a real strain on families. Right? Families who are living in close quarters, not being able to find escape routes and alternatives. So we've and this has obviously been a real issue that the government, through the interministerial agencies working together, have discovered that there has been an increase and a rise in the instances of domestic violence, family violence. Sometimes it's called, domestic violence. And here we're talking about obviously the spouses, intimate partners, but also children, right? And elderly and people with disabilities. Right? People with special needs, they are all victims. I'm not saying all of them are women, a majority of them are women, right? But there are also men who find themselves also as we tend to think of them as victims, but we now like to call them survivors. Right? But the perpetrators can be both male and female. So we've been, United Women Singapore has been running some mini campaigns to raise funds, to be able to help some of these shelters that are there, to help these women, specifically women, and very often they bring their children along because they fear for their life. All right, they fear for their safety of themselves and their children. So they leave, and then they go to the shelter and they seek help there. Right, the physical help, obviously in the space, but also help in terms of recovering, getting their life back together, some legal help. So these shelters are a place that provide them that help. And give them that space by which to start their lives again. So we've been raising funds through some of our programs. And again, this is programs that have come through volunteers, ideas that have come from our volunteers who stepped up and said, you know what, I want to help. I can bake, I can cook. I have friends who can cook. Why don't we start a social media campaign that we cook up a storm, and for all the cost of ingredients, we'll donate that. Or let's bake up a bake sale, and I'll donate all the money that I make from selling my cookies. All those things, they may seem not huge, they may seem small, but you know what? It's the heart that comes from behind it, and at the end of the day, the money it's so much appreciated because it comes from love. Right. So whether it's $100, it's $500, it's $10, it all adds up. And Nisa, we and I were just speaking. Timing is everything because the government actually has a matching program. So donations made to IPC status organizations, it's matched dollar for dollar by the government between now all the way through to the end of this year. So if you gave $10, that would be $20 in the end. So every bit counts. No amount is too small, obviously. And but again, I want to stress, it's not just the dollars. It's about the giving, the skills-based volunteering. It's about being part of a team that wants to help.
No, fascinating. No, thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to also hear from you while while we are discussing. Just a quick throwback to our audience. We have an engaged group of individuals on a Friday afternoon. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. And Georgette, I'm sure we'll have a fascinating response to any question.
I'll try to answer them.
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Meanwhile, while we are waiting for questions, we'd be very interested to hear from you. Do you have any words of wisdom for the next generation of comms professionals?
Wow. Okay. Find what you love, obviously, right? Work for a company that you really believe in, that you will go that extra mile, right? That you will bend backwards for, but who will bend backwards for you too? Look for the right values in the organization that you work with and work for. Find partners that obviously you want to work with too. I have a guide, a little guide that I use through kind of through the years that I've kind of developed. I call it my 5S guide. So 5 S's. It's really simple to remember. The first S is seek. All right. So what do you seek? You seek knowledge. You seek to improve yourself. And I think this is really, really important for communicators. It's easy to get caught up just in the space of your work. Okay, that you're working for a company, so you read everything there is about the industry of this company and the competitors and such. But guess what? You really should be reading wider. You should be looking at a lot of other things. You should be looking at socio-political happenings around the world. You should be reading up and absorbing, be a sponge, okay? Take in everything that you can get your hands on around science, technology, happenings, because it makes you a stronger person, a more knowledgeable knowledgeable person, obviously, but it also makes you a better communicator if you understand the world that we live in and the issues that are being faced by everybody. So seek knowledge, seek to improve oneself. The second S is share. So it's about sharing. It's about sharing. Good times and bad times. It's about sharing and giving, and obviously volunteering your time. We just talked about it, right? The passion. The third one is support. And here, this is obviously support for others around you, but don't be afraid to ask for support for yourself too, if you need support. I mean, this is where you want to speak up, right? So that's another S. I didn't quite count that, but it's about asking for support. If you need support, you'll be surprised. People will come to your help. Right? So don't be afraid to speak up. Ask for support. The fourth S is the word save. All right, and I can't stress enough the importance of saving. Simply because you just never know when you're going to need that little nest egg, as we've seen in this particular instance of the COVID, the last few months. Consider it your own personal business continuity planning. All right, that you need to be able to have that nest egg just in case, but also look at it as it's not just about to be used in a crisis situation or when things get bad. There may be great opportunities that come your way that you want to have some savings to leverage and use. So always be saving. I use the example of the little fairy tale, the old kid story, Three Little Pigs. Be piggy number 3. Okay, work really hard, diligently. Build that house of bricks. Don't be just dancing in the sunlight early, but save, right? Because later on you will benefit from it. And the last S is self. And I don't mean to be selfish, but yes, sometimes you have to be a little selfish. It sounds like it goes against what I just said earlier about sharing and supporting and giving, but sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish. You have to invest in yourself. You have to make sure that you look out for yourself, because only if you look out for yourself and you improve yourself, can you then help others along the way. And then you can bring others along the journey too. So that's my 5S guide. Though, most recently, I have to say I've added one more, so it's 5 plus 1. The last S is sleep. I know you laugh, Nisha, but
No, I resonate.
I have to say, and this obviously in my younger days, I didn't sleep enough, but wow, the restorative powers of sleep, amazing. You just function so much better. So I'm a big advocate, please get your sleep.
No, especially in this COVID environment, I'm sure a lot of us have lost lots of sleep, particularly those in the comms business.
Absolutely.
We have hit 5:30, but we find that our audience is kind of warming up. We do have 2 questions that are fascinating. If you're okay, we could continue and just respond here.
Of course.
We have a question from Miss Audrey Ye. So her question is kind of a build on your earlier comment about what young students can do. So her question is this: you are a role model for young female students wishing to enter the PR sector. Now, do you have any advice for young women starting their careers in a male-dominated PR sector?
Wow, that's a tough one. And you know what? I think number one, be confident of yourself. Confidence is key. Right? It's going to get you through a hell of a lot. Be sure of your own abilities. Right? Don't be afraid to ask. Ask for help. Right? Find allies. All right? Very often there are male allies who will help you along the way. Find mentors, find sponsors. Those are important too. Those will help you. And sometimes those allies and some of those mentors and supporters and sponsors need not necessarily be within the organization, but sometimes outside too. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, know your worth, be confident in yourself, stick to what you know is right. Okay. And don't be persuaded otherwise. Don't be beaten down. Speak up when you know is something needs to be defended. Make sure that your moral compass is always facing due north, because that's really important. And then again, you know, be confident of what you know to be right and speak up for that.
Oh, very good. Thank you. So the questions are streaming in.
Okay.
There's another one from Kathy O'Brien. Love your point about seeking knowledge from anywhere and
I know
everywhere.
Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no worries. So, Georgette, how do you ensure you're really reading varied views in these days of news being so filtered to the reader?
Good question. You know what? Just you've got to keep an open mind about everything. You've got to read different points of view, and at the end of the day, you take what you know and you believe to be what's relevant to you. Okay. It's easy just to regurgitate stuff. That's obviously, you know, easy. Some of it might be right, some of it might be wrong. I think part of it is thinking long and hard about what you read too. Don't just talk about it right away, because you haven't distilled it. You haven't gone to analyze it and to go back and say, is this what I'm really thinking, or do I want to read up a little bit more? Is there another view? Is there another facet to it? And dig deeper, because there are always sub-stories upon sub-stories. So peel away at that onion, obviously.
No, thank you. Okay, there. I think we have a couple of young people. There's a question from Joel Chia. His question is, what is the biggest issue facing the goal of businesses coming together to do good, excluding COVID-19?
Sorry, read that question again.
What is the biggest issue facing the goal of businesses coming together to do good?
The biggest issue, I don't think there's one big issue. I think there are many issues. You know, I think trying to stay focused, right? Because there's a lot of noise, there are lots of distractions, there's lots of disruption, right? And part of it is dealing with it, being able to pivot, being able to leverage off situations, being able to say, okay, this one's not going to work right now. How do we make lemonade from lemons? How do we take a bad situation and try to make it good? Having that kind of agility is critical. So people, the right people in place, that's obviously a critical piece to this all. All organizations in today, particularly in the giving space, in the charity space and NGO space, funding. So fundraising is always an issue for us, right? Finding good people, talent, and fundraising. Those are critical. But people here means both people to work in the organization, but also partnerships too. Finding the right partners, the partners who will go the extra mile, who are there with the staying power, who really believe in the cause and support the cause for the very right reasons, not because, well, you know, it's a pretty cause and it's going to get me a little bit of publicity. That's not the right reason to do it. But it goes back to having the right cause, supporting it, and staying the course. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, there's another question. How did your earlier career choices lead you to where you are now?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'd like to be able to say I planned it, but I didn't. No, I didn't. You know, I'd like to say I had this game plan for 10 years and 5 years and such. No, I didn't have that. A lot of it was just being open to different opportunities. And when they presented themselves, going for it, stretching myself, you know, a little bit, going into areas where the industry wasn't what I grew up with or knew or had expertise in, but stretching myself and saying, you know what, my skills are transferable. I will learn, and I'm going to make a real good effort at it. So yeah, so those opportunities came along, and I'd like to say, I figured out that, okay, TV and satellite TV and broadcast was definitely one of the areas of development in media, in the late 80s and the 90s, right? Some of you weren't even born then at that time, I'm sure. But that's where I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to learn about, and be immersed in. And then, transferring to an organization like Mastercard, payments. At that time, it was about cards. Now it's not about cards. It's about technology, and turning around that Mastercard is no longer just a card company. It's a technology company. It's a services company. It's advisory. All those different things. You don't plan those. Those sometimes present themselves. I think it's great if, especially for our younger audience, our younger executives here, that if you identify a space that you want to be in, it's great to try to go for it. I think it's fantastic, but don't be so laser focused that you don't see other things that might pop in along the way, because those are great opportunities, and you should give it a try if that's the case. I also was lucky in that I had people who supported me in my decisions along the way. So that's certainly helped in my path. And really, maybe the most conscious one was when I knew I wanted to move from the corporate space to the nonprofit space. That I planned for. That I worked towards, and I was again fortunate in the case of my last employer, Mastercard, that we were able to work this through. So there was a timeline, there was a gradual handoff. It was obviously beneficial on both sides, and it worked to everybody. It was a win-win situation, and at the end, I was able to transfer over, and I was able to, go into the area that I really wanted to use all my energies, and what I learned, and my corporate knowledge, and my, networks, and my expertise.
Wonderful, wonderful. We do have one last
Sure.
question. It's not so clear to me what context this in, but maybe you might have some ideas. Are there any common misconceptions that people may have?
About just comms in general, or
maybe let's help the person zoom in. Common misperceptions about doing good. Which is the focus of our conversation.
Okay. It's not the cure-all, right? And it's not a band-aid that you can just say, okay, my company's done something not quite right, and I'm going to try and make up for it by giving a big amount of money. I don't think that's the solution. And that's not something that you should be recommending, actually, to your client, internally or externally. Okay, the whole CSR strategy, the supporting a cause, is something that needs a lot more thought. It has to be aligned to business in the first instance. It has to align with values of the organization. It has to, you have to make sure not only from the product side, the services side, the HR side, the people side, there's so many different facets that it has to enable, but also support and drive. So it's not a quick fix. It's not a band-aid, certainly. Though some people think, well, if I'm seen just doing something very quickly, and if I give a big check, that makes it all okay. That's not the case. I think people are smarter than that. And they do dig deeper. And again, technology makes it easy for you to be able to find information anywhere and anytime.
Oh, wonderful. It's one of the rare occasions we've gone past the time, and our audience is still here, so that's a good sign.
Wow, that's a great sign. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for joining us.